Hello and welcome to Pal Keys, a show all about a guest, memorable game, memorable boss, and a bit of chat in between. Now, my guest this week is the editor of Gaming Bible, a gaming site based in Manchester. Now, before this, however, he studied journalism and media at Portsmouth Uni, graduating with a first in 2015. Less than a year later, he began his career at Unilad and freelanced at places such as NME, Kotaku, The Six Axis, and plenty more. He then went to Lad Bible, followed by leaving the industry to be content manager at Warwick Music Group, before returning in a blaze of glory to Lad Bible, now called Gaming Bible, as editor. Based in Nottingham, he can only be Ewan Moore. How are you, Mum?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem, man. Not a problem at all. So I have to say, when I was planning on bringing Pal Keys back, you were one of the first I asked, because I was planning on asking you in 2021, I believe, when it was Scrap Series 4, but I thought, things are happening, arranging a wedding, everything's too busy in life, I can't do podcasts right now, so I was like, got to have you on this, and yeah, like I say, really appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, as I said before we started recording, I'm a big fan of this particular podcast. I think you've had some great guests on, and I'm, just flattered to be in such esteemed company.
You are too kind, Ewan. You are very, very kind. But yeah, so now that I'm all flustered and starstruck, let's just begin this episode and see how it goes. So, like I say, as far as I'm concerned, I had a bit of like a meteoric rise, because you graduated from uni 2015, and then went straight into at the time, Lad Bible in 2016. And I'm jumping ahead a bit, but it's been like a busy, 9 or so years, hasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it has been right place, right time, which, as I'm sure is probably like 90% of getting anywhere in this industry is just making sure that you are extremely lucky. I graduated uni. Um, yeah, it was like 9 years ago last week, I think I was saying to my wife. Um, and then I went and worked at a call center for a little bit, which was, of course, awful, but we needed to pay the rent. I was doing a little bit of freelancing at that time for Kotaku. I was doing
Mhm.
some pieces. This is back when Keza McDonald was still running Kotaku UK.
Oh, great.
RIP to Kotaku UK, not to
Mm.
Keza. Um, I was doing some bits with them, not a lot, and then I can't remember how I saw the job ad for it was Unilad Gaming back in the day. It was known as.
Yeah.
I saw a job ad for it, and I thought, yeah, okay, let's go for it. It was all the way up in Manchester, and obviously I'm based in Nottingham, so I kind of forced myself to go for it because it was like, well, there are no video game journalism jobs in Nottingham. There just aren't.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do something here. So went to Manchester, interviewed, got the job on the spot, then realized I would have to commute from Nottingham to Manchester every day, which was difficult. Um, but I think, there's a point when you're that age, because I was like 22, 23 when I got the job at uni, lads. It's like where
Mm.
you're willing to do anything to stay in the games industry.
Yeah.
Once you get there, and I had that full-time job, and I was like, I have to do it. So, I was getting up at 5 a.m. and coming home at probably like 9 p.m.
Wow.
Really long. Obviously, the shifts in Manchester were normal working days, but it was that commute. But yeah, it all worked out.
Yeah, definitely. It's a strange thing because around 2016, 17, I was in Manchester and I would have to get the train to city centre and go back at 5:30, and it was an absolute nightmare getting the northern train. and just going back to my flight in Stockport at the time, and it was pure hell because you just didn't know if you were able to get the train at Piccadilly because
Yeah.
it was just madness. So yeah, I totally sympathise with you there, Ewan, because it was just mad. But the fact that you had to do Nottingham to Manchester, I mean, I'm guessing 5 days a week as well.
Yeah, it was 5 days a week.
Wow.
And also, side note, less than 10 minutes into the podcast, and I've already managed to complain about trains, which is really on brand for me, actually. So I'm quite pleased with that. But yeah, it was 5 days a week. Eventually, we moved outside of Nottingham, so slightly still closer to Nottingham, but that was sort of mutual choice for myself and my wife.
Hmm.
Um, she has a job in Nottingham or had a job at that time in marketing, and that was her career path. That's what she wanted to do, and she got that job before I got this job in Manchester.
Hmm.
So I was very happy to sort of compromise there, and we ended up moving to a little place called Alfreton, which is sort of this is all really boring.
That's
It's
good.
it's a little place outside of Derbyshire. It shaved about half an hour off the commute, and of course now I don't go in every single day, so it's
Yeah.
one of the very few positives of COVID, I think, was people realizing, oh, we can work remotely.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a shock because I mean, again, I'm also sidetracking here, but I was working in Manchester at a tech support place for to help with a food delivery company, and there was a time where I just and my friends still laugh about this to this day, really, and they'll love this me telling this story. So I broke my ankle, and I broke my ankle because I was trying to get a KFC delivery, and in a rush, I I suddenly ran to the door, and my ankle slipped, and then that was it. So that was the end. But again, I told work about this at the time, and even then, I had to go in, even though it was like a support. I worked off a laptop, and I was like, I can't come in. My ankle is broken. I have to get the train, then the tram, then walk. And it's like, it's not possible. And then
Yeah.
and they said they'd allow it for like 3 days a week. And then eventually, after maybe 3, 4 weeks, they were like, oh no, you have to come in now. So there I was, just like hobbling in. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And then, yeah, like a year later, COVID happened. And I always wonder, like, if that had happened like a year after COVID or something, like would that have just been full remote? Because people would have been doing remote anyway, during it. So yeah, it's just mad. It's absolutely mad. But yeah, sorry for that tangent anyway, Ewan.
No, I mean, I totally see your point, and it is. I think COVID, if it did anything, it proved that we could always work remotely, and it was just only when the bosses absolutely had to, because they didn't want us to do it for whatever reason, be
Mm.
it they're paying rent on an office building or they've got shares in Pret or whatever. I don't know. Um, but yeah, it just goes to show flexible working is absolutely possible.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, we've already gone to the middle of like this interview at the start of the podcast, which is on brand for me as well for Power Keys, even 3 years on. So let's just kind of like go back a little bit, Ewan, because it's like I said before. I mean, like from when I do my research with guests, I mean, I'll go through like people's like portfolios and see what they've been through, and obviously I listen to when you get it on VGC as well. I believe it was May last year, and but to be honest, you and like that's pretty much all I kind of know from the intro, really, because I kind of want to get into like your beginnings with like when was the first time you kind of like came across like video games and the console? What were like those early days for you, and like what? Just tell me all about it.
Sure. So my earliest memory, um, I think would be the PlayStation 1.
Hmm.
Um, I remember my dad coming home from Blockbuster with the 2000 Spider-Man game
Nice.
and X-Men Mutant Academy, which was kind of like it's like a Tekken style beat 'em up, uh,
Yes.
and like a big bag of popcorn, and we just sort of stayed up all night playing those games. And it's
Great.
actually a memory that I didn't realize I had until I started thinking about this podcast.
Right.
And then I was like, oh yeah, that was actually probably one of the best nights of my young life. And I adored both of those games and still do. and actually replayed both of them recently. I made my wife sit and play X-Men Mutant Academy with me,
Nice.
uh, which she wasn't crazy about, but, you know. But yeah, for me, that was the introduction, I guess, and that's when I realized, oh yeah, I could do this forever.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I remember like playing Spider-Man as a demo in official
Mm.
PlayStation magazine, because like before, 90s kids, grew up on Spider-Man animated series and everything, and some voices kind of carried over into the games. So there was like Octavius and Black Cat, I believe, and it was great. And yeah, Mutant Academy was just so good. And then the sequel, I believe, because funnily enough, it's been going a bit viral on Twitter lately, or X, or whatever the hell people call it. So Seanson's video Capcom games,
Mm.
and he has this Marvel games video as well. And he said about Spider-Man Mutant Academy, I didn't realize Mutant Academy 2 had a playable Charles Xavier. That looks dodgy as anything. So yeah,
I, I don't know. I think it was an interesting thing to try and include, but having played that sequel really not that long ago, like this year, and remembering you could unlock him and putting in the cheats to get him, it's not great.
no,
Uh, it doesn't play brilliantly. It doesn't look great. Um, but I think it's kind of cool that they tried to get a disabled character into a fighting game. I I don't know that back then it was. It maybe seems like he was a bit of a joke inclusion.
yeah.
That's maybe the vibe I get from it. But if they weren't joking, then hats off to them. But I think they maybe were taking the piss a little bit, so we could probably live
Yeah.
without it.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely the first game is the one that people remember the most, and that kind of like goes into another question really, because with the Spider-Man games, I mean, there was like a sequel that was brought out about a year later, like Enter Electro, and I kind of remember playing that. I kind of feel like it was more like an expansion pack of the first game. Like, do you remember playing that as well?
Yeah, no, I love both of them. I think Spider-Man 2 had some really cool ideas. I like it was the idea that you could sort of build your own power set.
Yeah,
You could sort of like choose your costume and then choose three or four different buffs, like maybe unlimited webbing, extra super strength, stuff like that. Didn't really add much to the game overall, but it was still decent. And I mean, like you say, it was basically just an expansion to the first game. But there was some cool fights in there. Like I remember the Sandman fight where you've got like douse him down with water before you can run in and pound on him. Some cool stuff in there, but I do prefer the first game overall. I think it had a more irreverent tone for starters. It was much more. It felt like it embraced the source material a lot more and was a lot happier to just sort of have fun with the medium, whereas Spider-Man 2 felt a little bit more straight-laced.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I know there was a mode that I just love enabling in the first game, which is the what if mode, where so many random things happen. Do you like remember that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I've got a very distinct memory of there's one level you can basically just float through the entire thing on a giant banana in what
Yes.
it's excellent. And it's stuff like that that I do think you're missing. Not to sound old man yells at cloud, but I do think you're missing a lot of that stuff from a lot of modern well, AAA games, certainly. Just that really silly sense of humor, those secrets that are just sort of thrown in there just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
Marvel's Spider-Man 2, you would not get what if mode or big head mode or anything like that. And I think that, it's poorer for it, frankly.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I was obviously, yet again, my brand, but like Tomb Raider. I mean, like you wouldn't expect to have like like Shadow the Tomb Raider, like with the ability to lock a butler in the freezer, or the quips or anything. It's such a change really to like compared to what core design were doing in 96, 97. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I do feel like, and again, I am sounding like old man yells at cloud, but what the hell, I'll embrace it. But it just seems to be like a lot more seriousness like around, it seems, and it would be nice to kind of like see that with like perhaps maybe the upcoming Wolverine game or
Yeah,
something else. It would be great. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from there, and yeah, I've been playing the first Spider-Man game actually on my Steam Deck through unofficial means, and it's just been great. It's been really fun.
brilliant. Yeah, honestly, I've literally yesterday I was thinking about doing that for my Steam Deck. I'm going to take that as a sign that I need to get it done.
Yeah, because I'm sure like you posted your Steam Deck, didn't you, like a couple months ago? And I know actually, no, I'm mistaken. You were wondering about what you could do on it, and I think I sent you a tweet about Wind Waker.
You did, and that was the first thing that I did when my Steam Deck arrived.
Yeah.
Because you know what, if Nintendo's not going to do it, what do
I've-
you want from me? I waited for like 8 years. I would have happily paid to buy that game again
yeah.
on Switch. You're not giving it to me. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, that was pretty much me when I got the Steam Deck because I was hoping every direct that got announced, I would do
Yeah.
a tweet and I'd just go, I really hope it's Wind Waker this time because the
Mhm.
ability to play that on an OLED Switch, on an OLED TV, in
Mhm.
widescreen, why the hell not? And, it feels like the June just gone, time recording with this direct, it feels like it is winding up now with the Switch now. And we're going to maybe hear about the successor maybe in December, January. But it could be a baller move to kind of like see Wind Waker HD as like a launch title, perhaps. It'll be interesting if that happens.
Yeah, I could see that. I think certainly that it seems like they're gonna. I don't know. I get the feeling they're gonna really go all out with this launch lineup. I mean, it seems to me Metro Prime 4 is almost certainly going to be a Switch 2 launch game, right?
Yeah, yeah,
They'll probably have a new 3D Mario. I mean, when you look back at like the Switch's first year, that was a killer first year.
yeah,
Yeah, you had like Breath of the Wild, obviously as a launch game, and then that year Super Mario Odyssey comes out, I think in the November. I mean, two of arguably the greatest games of all time in the Switch's first year. Um, but I mean, what a great console, honestly. I look back at like my 7 years with it, and it's like this is, I think, undeniably just the best thing I've ever owned. I love my Switch so much. It's just such a wonderful bit of kit.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, my Switch is the one I got from launch. It's one I pre-ordered. It arrived at my old job, and just loved it. And I just can't believe, like, even now, me being like a retro gamer guy, is like I can just fire up legally Metal Gear Solid and Tomb Raider and Street Fighters, and soon it's going to be like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which I can't believe is coming to the Switch, or X-Men vs. Street Fighter, like, and
Yeah.
it's just there legally, and I can't believe it. It's so good. I can't believe it. It's after 7 years, it's great. So good.
Yeah. I mean, like every time you think, okay, it's winding down, there's another direct, and it's like, here's a bunch of ports and indies and things that you never saw coming. Like, I mean, God, Echoes of Wisdom. I mean, I just, oh my God, just what a console. Um, sorry, I could go on about the Switch for hours. But yeah, I think it's wonderful, and I can't wait to get a new Zelda in my hands.
Yeah, no, 100%. So that kind of like raised like a bit of a question for me. So when you said about Spider-Man X Men Mutant Academy,
Mm.
obviously this was around the time where the PS2 was about to launch,
Yeah,
and we were hearing about Project Dolphin, which turned into Nintendo GameCube and stuff.
yeah.
So what kind of happened like after that? I mean, did you get a PS2 or was it a GameCube? Like what happened there?
So, interestingly, so we had the PS1, we grew up on that, and then you sort of went into the GameCube, PS2, Xbox era, and we got a GameCube. I don't know the reasons behind that because I was 7 or 8, so I kind of got the console that I got.
Hmm.
Maybe it's financial reasons. I don't. I might be misremembering this, so you have to correct me. But was the GameCube the cheaper of the three?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Right. I think that probably had a lot to do with it. Just because we were, a working class family, and there were like three kids, and you can't be shelling out for free consoles, so it made sense that they
Yeah.
went for the cheaper of the three. But I mean, that I think probably changed the trajectory of my life because I liked video games a lot when I had the PS1, and then when I got the GameCube, I properly fell in love. Like I didn't just I feel like with the PS1, I fell in love with the games that I knew I would love because, they had the superheroes I loved in them,
Yeah.
or the characters that I knew. I didn't really have, I mean, I certainly wasn't playing games like Resident Evil or Metal Gear Solid because I was too young. And my mum and dad were actually quite strict on age ratings and stuff for
Right.
me. So I didn't really get exposed to a lot of that stuff until much later. And then I got the GameCube, and ironically, the first game I remember playing on that was Batman Vengeance,
Oh God, yeah. I
which
remember
was not a good game,
that.
but it had like Kevin Conroy, it had Mark Hamill,
Yeah.
and it had that beautiful sort of cel shaded Art Deco style going for it. So I did have a lot of love for that. But then, Wind Waker drops into my lap, um, with the had the special edition, so I had Ocarina of Time on it as well.
Well. Yeah.
Um, which I'd also never played before. And for some reason, I think just because the disc was already in the GameCube, and there was a rule in my house for a while. Sorry to backtrack here very briefly, but
Sure.
I wasn't allowed to change discs in the GameCube because the one time I did it, I don't know how I did it, but I very badly scratched one of the discs.
Oh, right.
and broke it. I think it was Batman Vengeance actually that I just completely messed up. So the rule was quickly put in place that if games needed to be changed, I would have to go to an adult. Um, so for that reason, Ocarina of Time was in the GameCube before Wind Waker. So that's the first Zelda game I remember playing. Um, and I mean, what can you say about Ocarina of Time that hasn't already been said? It completely blew me away. Um, And I didn't really have that. I didn't grow up with like Nintendo fans.
Sure.
Um, so I wasn't really aware of the sort of prestige around Zelda. Obviously we all knew Pokemon and loved Pokemon, but Zelda was a new one on me. Um, so getting to discover that for myself was, I mean, yeah, it changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that must have been like a massive change because, like, when you, I can't believe I'm doing this, but comparing like the first Spider-Man game with Wind Waker, right? So
Mm.
you got Spider-Man. You're at the top of like certain skyscrapers and buildings. You feel like you can just swing anywhere. And there's invisible walls that the web sticks to, and you're swinging around. And then about a year later, you get a GameCube, and there's Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time, and you've got this it's almost like non-linear like landscape of where you can just run across Hyrule like fields, or you can go on a boat in Wind Waker. I mean, that must like for you at that age must have been pretty mind blowing to have that difference really from Spider-Man to Wind Waker.
It is, it's a high I've been chasing for the last 20 years of my life, trying to get a game to make me feel the way Wind Waker made me feel. Um, and never really getting that. Just the sense of discovery and being able to, yeah. And when you really look at it from an objective level, there are a lot of islands in Wind Waker where there's really nothing there.
Sure, yeah.
There's really nothing of interest. But when you are, what, 7, 8 years old, as I would have been, and you're sailing between these islands, and it all just feels so vast
Yeah.
and boundless, and I'd never experienced anything like it. And I know that that itch is never going to be scratched again. Not because there aren't games quite like Wind Waker, because there are, and I've played them. I'm never going to be 8 years old playing Wind Waker for the first time again.
Yeah. No, I get that. No, I really do. I mean, like it was the same for me with like Metal Gear Solid when there was that actual story and it made you like involved in it all, even when I was 9 years old. And yeah, I mean, when I got a GameCube, I mean, I was playing a Rogue Squadron Rogue Leader, and just that experience of playing even just the first level and just seeing like the amount of lasers in the space, and then like towards the end, you've got the soundtrack, the actual soundtrack. You've got someone voicing Han Solo. It's not Harrison Ford, but it's close enough, and you got that tension, and it just feels so immersive. And oh yeah, it's something that hasn't really kind of like come back to me like since really. And to be honest, I mean, I'm amazed that hasn't been remastered yet for Switch either. So it's just amazing. It's so good.
Yeah. And I mean, look, Rogue Squadron still looks incredible to this day, I would argue. I think that's something the GameCube doesn't get a lot of credit for. But when you look at, Rogue Squadron, Metroid Prime, Wind Waker, these are all games that still today look incredible.
Yeah.
Like they hold up. And obviously Wind Waker and Metroid Prime have had these remasters that look great, but you could go back to the GameCube versions and still be impressed by them.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like when I'm like researching for certain articles or the books and things, and I come across like say like Nintendo's time with the N64, and they were seeing like what they could do, and I still can't help, and no one's like talked to me about like this really, but from what I can like gather, it just feels like Nintendo were put on the almost like had the wrong impression as to how they could rival the Sega Saturn and PlayStation with cartridges, with the controller and everything else. It just seemed like the whole console was designed for Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, and that's it. But when it came to the GameCube, it felt like they were kind of like, almost put in their place a little bit by what had happened in that previous generation. And then we got games like Metroid Prime, Wind Waker, Rogue Squadron even, and everything else. So it feels like the mistakes of what they did in the 90s, it helped them to kind of like see how the GameCube, well, even though it didn't do great in sales, I think for the games that you just mentioned, it thrived.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, if you look at Nintendo's history, they have this pattern of trying just the maddest stuff and then sort of realizing what about it worked and what didn't. I mean, you just look at the Wii U and the Switch. Like, I love the Wii U,
Yeah, great.
full disclosure. But I mean, the Switch it came in with a clear message, had games, did absolutely everything that the Wii U just didn't or couldn't or wouldn't do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure I've mentioned this on the show like years ago, but I'll always remember that I was in game once, where around the time the Wii U was coming out, it was near Christmas time, and mum and a boy was just looking at them, and the boy was like asking about it, and she grabbed like one of the sales advisors, and she was like, "Oh, this Wii U. So where do you plug it into the Wii? Like, what happens there?" And to me, like ever since then, that's like the impression I always kind of got from it, because it was just marketed horribly, I thought. And it was such a shame because I did like it really. And for what it offered, I mean, like Nintendo Land, for instance, really great.
Yeah.
But, oh man, they sure like shot themselves in the foot again with that. But yeah, like you say, they're onto a winner with the Switch. I just hope that they just carry on with the Switch 2 really, and make sure it's backwards compatible, make sure, it just they just keep it going. Essentially, they don't need to do much. I don't think this time. I don't think there's any need to really. I think people just want to play games with a great frame rate now and see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Just a more powerful version of what you've already got. I'd be very happy with that. Like let's not mess around. But yeah, that's the thing with Nintendo. You never know. They could release or announce the Switch 2 and suddenly it's got, I don't know, a 3D gimmick again or just something completely mental that you just wouldn't see coming. Um, so yeah, look forward to that being announced.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, me too. So before we go into the first question of the show, I just kind of want to get into like, so with your past. I mean, especially when you said you went to Bournemouth with to study journalism and media. So, was it something you always wanted to do, like with journalism? I mean, where did it kind of stem from, like this interest in journalism?
So I think it is that I was always good at writing. I had parents that encouraged me to read and write a lot. I had really good teachers at primary school that saw that I was good at writing and really encouraged it and praised it. You know, you can't really underestimate the importance of teachers at that age that recognize something you're good at and sort of do what they can to nurture it. You know,
Yeah.
I had teachers that would lend me like Spike Milligan poems and turn me on to different sorts of the Spike Milligan stuff for kids, obviously, not some of the more outrageous stuff. Um, so sort of having that, knowing that I was good at it, made it easier to consider what I could use writing for.
Mm,
And then I distinctly remember being in Tesco and seeing a copy of official Nintendo magazine, and it caught my eye, this issue in particular, because it had a free gift back when the magazine industry wasn't absolutely dying and they could afford to give free
mm,
gifts. Um, and it had a CD with Zelda music on it.
right.
So for me, I was like, can I please have that? So I sort of went for the CD, and then I read the magazine and I thought it was brilliant, getting all this insight and previews about things that hadn't come out yet. And I realized that, like, 9, 10 years old, like, oh, you can get paid to write about video games.
Mm,
And that kind of stuck in my head and was kind of like a North Star for every decision I made from that point onwards, in terms of what to do at A level, where to go to uni. So I was really, really fortunate in sort of having a very clear idea of what I wanted to do at that age, because I think it's a lot to ask anyone to know what they want to do at even, 16, 17.
yeah.
I think it's a hell of an ask. Um, so I know and appreciate just how lucky I was to have that sort of goal and that vision. So yeah, that's how I ended up in Portsmouth.
Yeah, that's great, man. No, that's really great. So we'll put pause on that in a minute because I want to get into this memorable game. One or two questions of the show. So, Ewan, I know this is a challenging thing with every guest that I speak to when it comes to a memorable game, because it's always just one game. Sometimes it could be two, but we'll see. But what is the game that you've picked?
Well, it probably won't come as any surprise whatsoever that I've picked The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker.
I'm shocked.
Uh, yeah, I know. Um, it is. It's the game that changed everything for me. It's the game that made me want to engage with games on a deeper level. It's it's the game that captured my imagination more than anything else. It's the game I still play to this day once a year without fail. I will go back and play it, however I can, even if it's through less than honest means. But as we said earlier, Nintendo, that's your fault. I was happy to pay you the money, but you're not going to take it. Um, and it's everything to me. I mean, it's Zelda is, I believe, the greatest video game franchise of all time.
Yeah.
I think there is something about it that I don't. I think it really unites gamers everywhere. Like, no matter what sort of console, what platform, what background, what opinions on any of the games, there is something about a new Zelda that I think gets everyone really excited. There's just this prestige about the series.
Mm,
And I think I was very lucky coming to Wind Waker when I did, because I was nowhere near online enough to see the backlash to the visuals.
yeah.
So that completely passed me by. And, you know, I remember being disappointed when Twilight Princess was announced and it didn't look like Wind Waker,
Wow.
but everyone else was freaking out. Obviously there's those famous E3 reaction videos of like grown men crying at the Wind Waker reveal,
Mm.
and I just remember thinking, "Well, I miss the I miss the cartoony magic. I miss it looking like a proper bright, colorful adventure. Um, because that to me is what Wind Waker is more than any other Zelda game. It's a proper adventure in the truest sense. It feels like a Pixar movie.
Mm.
And it's this story of like traveling the sea looking for your sister and I mean yeah, it's a wonderful game. I love the story. I think Ganondorf is more interesting than he has ever been in any other game.
Yeah,
I
true.
love I love the entire concept of it being a game about struggling to let go of the past and being unwilling to embrace the future with that's Ganondorf's entire deal. That's that's the king's entire deal. Um, and I think Nintendo probably didn't know it or plan for it, but I think it's very interesting that you have this sort of battle between Link representing the future of Hyrule
Yeah.
and Ganondorf representing an unwillingness to let go of the past. And around that time, the very reaction to that game was fans kicking off about it representing something very different.
Yeah.
Uh, but of course, history has been very kind to Wind Waker, as well it should be because it's a perfect game in my eyes.
No, that's great. No, that's really well put. I mean, yeah. So I remember when, so Nintendo used to, hold these events called Space World, and in 2000, I remember that they were showing these like showcases of what the GameCube could be capable of, and they showed this video of Link fighting Ganondorf, and it all looks, well at the time anyway, like photorealistic. Just obviously not now, and people were hoping that was going to be like the next game. And yeah, I remember like when they show that Toon Link now they call it, and people were disappointed. And to be honest, like when I saw it in a magazine, I think it was NGC. Like it just looked great to me. It did, like you say, it looked like a Pixar film because around the time, Pixar were on a roll. I mean, you had Toy Story 2, you had Monsters Inc., Incredibles, and that's what it reminded me of. And it was great. It was so good, and especially the fact that you could use a Game Boy Advance as well. It was so good like, in that regard too. So yeah, it's great. And yeah, like you say, through unofficial means, and again, if Nintendo's listening, I will happily pay. Like the fact that I'm able to play it on different devices is just so good. I mean, thank Christ that they actually remastered it and gave it a HD release because it looks great in 1080. So yeah, it's really good, and yeah. But there's one thing actually, because I know like they were, from what I've seen, they were planning on a sequel, and then they were told to do Twilight Princess. But there have been spin-offs like Spirit Tracks and things on the handhelds. Have you like tried them as well?
Yeah, no, I mean if there's a Zelda game out there, I've played it.
Okay, fair, right?
I I really enjoyed Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass. My love of that world and those particular characters and that art style was such that I probably liked Phantom Hourglass more than I should have. Looking back, that central dungeon that you have to go through over and over again
Mm,
is not good. But I really, I think the DS was a really good home for that art style. And it gave me back a little bit of the feeling of sailing between these different islands, and it was a much smaller, reduced version um, of what Wind Waker offered, but it was at the end of the day a direct sequel to my favorite game of all time.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a real place in my heart for Phantom Hourglass. Spirit Tracks slightly less so, just because the train stuff is just the complete antithesis of everything I liked about, you know, being able to sail in any direction and go anywhere and see what you want, and then suddenly literally being on rails
Mm.
was not what I wanted from my Zelda. Um, but it's a shame to me that, outside of Smash Bros, like Toon Link is gone. I would love to see another game in that style one day. Who knows? Maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this kind of leads into like a final question, really, because obviously, Tears of the Kingdom came out in 2023, and I loved it. It was really great. But there are kind of like rumblings that they are already making like the next Zelda title, and really like even like what would like you like to see in the next like Zelda game, and would you want to see like a proper follow up to Wind Waker where Link can like sail even more seas on a Switch 2 and see how it goes? I mean, what would you like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see something that was more of a spiritual successor to Wind Waker. Um, because I really enjoyed the bits in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild where you did get to sort of sail around.
Mm,
And I think if you took Tears of the Kingdom's kind of build anything approach and you put that on a vast ocean full of different islands to explore, I think that would be an absolute winner.
mm,
I love the idea of maybe going from island to island just by building whatever scrappy little piece of junk you can manage to put together. And, as you go, obviously, eventually get more reliable, stable tools so you can see more of the world. But I really love the idea of something that kind of marries the best of Tears of the Kingdom with Wind Waker. And certainly in terms of art style, yeah, I think Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild did hit a real sweet spot for me. Sort of combining the best of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword.
mm.
Um, but I wouldn't be mad if they went back to something a little more like Wind Waker. That would be the ideal game for me. Basically, anything called Wind Waker 2, I'm there day one.
Yeah.
That's
No, definitely. I mean, it's a funny thing, really. I'm not just saying this. I'm really not. But when you go into the skies in Tears of the Kingdom, and you're like going from like one like floating platform to the next, and you're collecting items, and you're fighting like the enemies and stuff. And I was reminded of Wind Waker in a sense. I was thinking like, how could that? Just imagine like you could copy all of those, like all the floating platforms and enemies and stuff, but just basically put water, like just fill it with water, and instead of floating platforms, you got them just wavering on the sea, and you're making all these tools to make a boat or even to the hell of it a jet ski, and it's great. And to me, I was like, that would be a great like Wind Waker 2 follow up, just seeing what would happen. And yeah, that was just kind of the thought, really. It's why I asked. It's just, it seems like that engine that they've made, I can't see them scrapping it completely because there's so much you can do in it.
Yeah, I mean, look, for better or worse, whatever people's opinions on this new direction that Zelda's gone in, I think that we are getting more of that.
Yeah,
There's there is simply no way when you look at the sales of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, um, there is no way that they're going back. Um, and more traditional dungeons, obviously that would be great, but I think the sort of the basic formula of massive open world, do anything in any order, sort of, this is your sandbox. I think that's Zelda for the foreseeable future.
yeah, no, 100%. So, just going back really then to your career. So, like I say, you go to Portsmouth Uni and you graduate with the first 2015. So, during this time, like, were you kind of like maybe just putting the feelers out to perhaps maybe try and freelance and see what was going there? Like, what was going on?
Yeah, so wasn't really until third year that um I'm very bad at thinking about and actually planning for the future. So it wasn't until third year that it kind of dawned on me. It's like, oh, yeah, I actually need to start thinking about this stuff. Uh, One of the units in third year was fortunately work experience. So I put some feelers out and I messaged uh Games Master magazine, which was still around at that time. And I emailed them on a whim and they got back to me and offered me a placement in the future offices in Bath, um, which I could not have afforded in a million years. So I was incredibly lucky that I had a family friend of a friend who I had never spoken to, but they were very, very generous and put me up for that week.
Oh wow.
So I was able to go there and do that. And that I think was a big moment for me because I mean one of the pieces of advice I got was start freelancing, don't work for free. I was like, oh my God, yeah, that did not occur to me because I was writing gaming stuff for Portsmouth Uni's newspaper, which I obviously wasn't getting paid for. I mean, stuff like that is great, but it can also feel like a bit of a vanity project to
Yeah,
just sort of put your name in print. Like no one or very few people who aren't working on, I mean, I can't speak for all student papers. I wouldn't want to, but at least with that one, it felt like the only people really reading it were the people who were working on it.
sure.
Um, that was the feeling I got. So when I was told at Games Master, start pitching to people, that was like it hadn't even occurred to me that I could do that. So I sent some pictures, and Kazo from Kotaku got back to me. Um, I feel like it was really stupid, irreverent stuff. Because that's just the kind of stuff I enjoyed writing the most at the time. I think the first piece I submitted to her was like why Link from Zelda is actually a massive dickhead. It's like it was a bunch of stuff just about why he breaks all social conventions and is actually an awful person. And I thought no one's ever going to take that, much less pay me for it. Um, but no, she really liked it, and I think it's a shame that places like obviously Kotaku UK is long gone. But I think it's a real shame that places with a genuine voice and tone and a commitment to being silly and having fun,
Yeah.
uh, just getting ground up by the SEO content mill. Because certainly I wouldn't have been able to get my break in the industry if people weren't looking for just complete nonsense.
Yes, I agree. It's definitely because I think that around the time that you were in your final year, just I was trying to like break in as well and freelance while having a full time job. And even then, I mean, it was great because there was people who would just kind of reply with like bits of advice and stuff like that, and it was great. And I mean, there were a couple of sites that I do for free, but at the time I was like, I just want to get like as much experience as I can because like, I was doing a computing degree, so there was no journalism in this degree at all. And I was writing for the uni magazine, which kind of started everything. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from there. So yeah, so when you finished uni, and like I said, I mean, you kind of went to at the time Lad Bible Gaming about the year after. So how did that come to be, and what did it feel like when you got that job in 2016?
I mean, it felt amazing. We touched on the commute and how rough that was, but with 20, so it was quite late in 2016 I got the job, but 2017 I look back on that as one of the greatest years of my life. I was really properly getting going, really helping to build this gaming brand because it was pretty new when I started there. It was just myself and one other person who was my boss at the time, a guy called Mark Foster. Um, and so I was sort of helping build it and establish kind of like a silly tone and crucially make sure that it was not laddie. Because one of my concerns when I joined at Unilads was, well, it's called Unilads. I don't really know what to expect from this. And certainly there was a version of Unilad back in the day that had a nasty reputation. Um, and when I joined, it was different people sort of rebuilding it to be something new.
Mm.
So it felt really exciting to be part of that, and to sort of help shed that old image and, just write about video games and get paid. It felt ridiculous. I mean, it still does.
Yeah,
Like 10
yeah,
years later, it still feels unreal to be doing it. Um, but yeah, God, 2017, just personally, professionally, it was great. I mean, I got married that year. It's the year. My wife doesn't love it when I conflate these two things, but in March 2017, I got married and I got Breath of the Wild. So like,
that's
it
a
was a
win.
great, yeah, it was a great year. And I think my wife maybe thinks that I cared about Zelda slightly more, which is of course not true. It comes close. It comes very close.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, that's fair. So this is kind of like an interesting thing, really, for me because I remember when this happened. So you were at uni, lads, and then you work at Lad Bible Group in about 2021, don't you? So you become a senior journalist there, and the move, and then once that happens, I mean, you then leave to. And I was surprised when I saw this when you announced this. You left in 2022 to be the content manager at Warner Music Group, and that lasted a bit. So, what made the change there? Like, what made you kind of like do the switch?
Well, there were a bunch of reasons. I think the first was, I mean, I loved being a gaming Bible, which is obviously why I came back.
Mm.
But at that time, I didn't feel like there was any kind of progression for me. Um, my boss was my boss and had been for years, and you know, I think he's brilliant, so absolutely nothing against him. He's a good friend, but I had no indication that he was going anywhere, and there wasn't really another step up from senior journalist for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this was coming at a time where I was also just kind of weighing up how much longer I wanted to be in the games industry, and I sort of had a growing voice in the back of my head. It was like, if you don't go and try and do something else now, you might end up completely screwed if you ever lose this job and your CV is just writing about video games.
Mm.
And that's probably a completely baseless fear, but for me, I sort of panicked and thought, well, you know, I have a hard enough time explaining to my grandparents that writing about video games is actually a real job.
Mm-hmm.
How many interviewees or potential employers are gonna sort of look at that and think, well, that's nonsense. Um, but also the job at Warwick Music Group just seemed really interesting. They are a company that make environmentally friendly sort of plastic instruments,
Mm.
specifically designed to be accessible and affordable and like help kids get into music.
Right.
And I just thought that was really cool. And I went and met with the guy who runs it, and he was lovely. Really, really nice bloke. And after that chat, I was just sort of sold. It just felt like a really good step.
Yeah.
And I had a great time there. I was not there for long, not there for very long at all. Um, but it was a wonderful team of people, and I learned a lot about more sort of like business focused writing, copywriting. These are all skills that I kind of knew I had anyway, but I wanted to be able to sort of develop them and prove that I could do it
Yeah.
because these are important transferable skills, I think.
Mm.
Um, and it was really great, and I loved doing it, and I loved getting to sort of shine a light on a lot of the really cool stuff that that company was doing. Um, but then I got a call about 2 months in from my old bosses saying that my editor had left, and they were looking for someone to come back and take over Gaming Bible. And I was like, well, if I don't go and do this now, I'm probably never going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like as soon as I heard that, I realized, oh, I'm not quite done with this industry. Like, I feel like there's more I want to do. And certainly in the back of my mind was, oh, 2023 is looking like a huge year for games. You know, like,
Yeah.
I really want to sort of be there for that. Um, so yeah, I went back, and I'm really glad I did. It's been it's been about a year and a half now, I think, and it's been wonderful. It's been really great, sort of building everything back up and sort of working with some really wonderful new writers and freelancers, and yeah, I've had a great time.
No, that's great. I mean, I have to say that, not many people will kind of like do what you did because there is that voice at the back of your mind, like thinking like, what if, is this all there is? Is this all I'm capable of? And you'll get that curiosity, at the back and just wondering. And, even though, like, from what I've seen, it's only a few months, I mean, it's enough, isn't it? Because, you get used to a certain thing and then you kind of realise. So I think it's in like a healthy thing, really. So, it's just full on respect, really, for how you kind of came across it. It's interesting, really.
Yeah, no, and like I say, I loved it there at Warwick Music Group, and I mean, frankly, they were very nice when I called about 2 months in to say I'd be going back. You
Yeah.
know, they had every right to be seriously pissed at me, but they were wonderful, because they're a really lovely, wonderful group of people, and I doubt they'll be listening to this, but they're they are great, and if anyone listening is looking to get their young children into affordable instruments, Warwick Music Group.
It's
Yeah,
great.
check them. They're great.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. Now that is a great little point to just put it on pause slightly because we'll go into the second question and then we'll go straight into Gaming Bible. So, second question, Ewan, like memorable boss. I'm very curious after what we've talked about now the last hour, like what this could be. So, what is it?
So I was tempted to pick the final fight in Wind Waker, because I do love it, but I also suspected that I would be talking a lot about Wind Waker over the course of this episode, and I thought, probably best to change it up. So I, after much deliberation, decided to go for the SAX from Metroid Fusion.
Oh, great. Okay, brilliant.
Um, I think that is hands down one of the most interesting bosses in any game ever. Specifically because of the way it's sort of approached and teased throughout the entire game. Metroid Fusion is terrifying. It's a
Mm,
survival horror game stuck onto a Game Boy Advance cartridge, and the first time you see the SAX, you're told this is Samus Aran at full power. And if you're a fan of Metroid, you know what that is because you've played as that.
yeah,
You know, I mean, how terrifying is that to sort of have played out that power fantasy and then be told, right, you don't have any of those toys now, but the thing stalking you does. So you know better than anyone how absolutely terrifying that's going to be.
yeah,
And just the unbearably tense moments when you walk into a room and it's there and it's looking for you, and you might accidentally drop down and suddenly have to run away from it. And obviously all of this is scripted 'cause it's a Game Boy Advance game. So you get to know where these moments are going to be.
mm,
The first time you play it, like my God, just, just squeaky bum time. Wow, just horrendous. So when the time comes to actually fight the SAX, just what a satisfying moment, Like you're fully powered up, you're ready to take it down. And even then, it's still not an easy fight,
yeah,
You don't just breeze through it. It's an absolutely brutal fight that just does not let up. And it's a wonderful, tense end to just a beautifully atmospheric game. And I think probably the Metroid game that doesn't get the love it deserves.
Well, first of all, I think Squeaky Bum Time could be this episode's title, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
But I think no one has mentioned this boss in the entire time I've done Palkeys, and I absolutely agree because I got Metroid Fusion for Christmas in 2002, and even on that small screen with no backlit display on a Game Boy Advance, I remember it must be it was early in the game anyway, but you went down one of those lifts and you go down the lift as normal, but then suddenly a massive explosion comes on the right. Um,
Mhm.
and you're thinking, oh man, like that's pretty powerful. And then you see it like following you, and then there are times where, you know, you'll see it on the screen. If you encounter it, that's it. It's pretty much game over. And yeah, it is haunting. It really is, especially when you see the little cutscenes where you see the organism and it's got like no pupils. It's so creepy. But yeah, I do remember that, and it just reminds me of like similar bosses like Nemesis in Resident Evil 3. Like you can either fight or run, and a lot of the times I ran. So yeah, and I agree. Like when Metroid Fusion came out on the Switch Online service earlier this year, straight away I was playing it. Straight away I was there, and I've actually because it's got save state features. I've saved it at certain points where you encounter it, and I just find it's great.
Yeah, no shame in that, man. I mean, look, it's a perfect game to me. It's perfectly paced.
Mm,
Obviously, it gets stick for being a little bit more linear, um, but I think that's to its credit. It kind of needs to be for the game it is.
yeah.
You shouldn't just be running around a space station willy-nilly. Like Samus has a very specific goal in that game, and it's all in service of just perfectly paced scares.
Mm.
Right, I mean, right up until the final moments, and I mean, a survival horror game on the Game Boy, like from Nintendo. I think that's excellent, and I'm sure there are people that would argue it's not a survival horror game. That's fine. Obviously, it's a Metroidvania first and foremost, but you know, to me, I will always sort of see it as a hybrid of the two.
No, I agree. No, definitely. And I played Metroid Dread as well.
Mhm.
And look, don't get me wrong, that is a good game. But yeah, there were survival horror aspects in that as well, like from some of the enemies you fought. But yeah, I just don't feel like it was as good as Metroid Fusion. And that's just my opinion. A lot of people really praised Dread, and I just thought there was something missing that Fusion had. To me, anyway. I don't know whether it was like the narrative or the graphical style, but yeah, Fusion, I just feel like it still knocks it out of the park, and yeah, it's just great.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I love Dread. I mean, I was just amazed that after what, maybe like 13 years, maybe more. I'd have to
Mm,
fact check that. We finally got Metroid 5. Um, like that was incredible to me
mm,
because obviously, I mean, Metroid is my second favorite franchise. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think something gets lost without that pixel art.
yeah,
I don't know what it is, but I feel that of a lot of Metroidvanias, there's something about just a sort of pixely, grungy Metroidvania that just really works
yeah.
in a way that Metroid Dread rather, just parts of it just looked and felt a little too clean.
Mm,
So yeah, I completely agree.
yeah, and I apologise, listener, but this kind of goes into a different tangent that you've just kind of like raised because yeah, so I've always got like a soft spot for pixelated games and pixel art and things like that. I mean, like one of my favorite fighting games is X Men vs Street Fighter and Marvel vs Capcom. And when I see games like Marvel vs Capcom 3 and Infinite, and it's got the 3D style and everything, I feel like something is missing there because I just love to see a game that has that pixel art there. And when I see even games like Street Fighter 6, there is a part of me that feels like, oh, if only they just had this mode, this DLC mode where it just transforms into pixelated art in Street Fighter 6 for no reason. So yeah, I don't know whether again that's like old man Daryl here, but yeah, I just love to see that.
Yeah, it scratches an itch. And I mean, that's the thing. I didn't even grow up with like 32-bit games, so I don't know what it is for me, but I do find myself every now and again with a really, really specific itch for something just pixel art. There's just something about it. I mean, like Sea of Stars, Stardew Valley, games like that. They'll just Eastwards. They pull me in specifically because of the way they look, and then the gameplay is very much a bonus.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, great picks, even great picks. So, just to kind of like wrap up, really. So, like you say, editor at Gaming Bible. It's a site that I read as much as like VGC, Tech Radar Game, and a couple others, and it's really great. I mean, it's interesting as well. Like, the name change as well in recent years. Like, it's now Gaming Bible, and I love the layout of it as well. I think it's really, really like attractive on the homepage. And so, do you kind of feel like there's like a bit of a difference compared to when you were last at Gaming Bible and to now? And do you feel like there's any kind of like challenges or any even like more highlights that you've had like now compared to your time before? And as a cat.
Yes. Yeah, as promised, the cat has joined us. Um, yeah, so I think the big thing for me is when I left, we were very much social media focused.
Hmm.
That is kind of where Gaming Bible got most of its traffic was through sort of posting on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, one of the reasons I kind of left, as well as the sort of more predominant ones that I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
was that I wasn't sure how sustainable that was and how much longer we could keep going that way.
Mm.
Uh, so when I came back, one of my big things was we need to do more with search and to sort of push Google, which you know, as I'm sure a lot of people who've seen from the last year is about as it's I mean it's all a house built on sand really, isn't it? Like
Mm.
Facebook, Google, wherever you're getting your traffic, you are at the whims of constantly shifting algorithms. Um, but for me, it was really interesting sort of working out what Google wants and sort of making that pivot to be more search focused, but doing it without relying on guides and that sort of content. I mean, because frankly, my big thing was what's the point in trying to do guides when there are dozens of much better staffed websites out there also doing that?
Right.
Like, what am I going to do other than, you know, give my writers burnout? Like, there is no point trying to make someone do a guide for Elden Ring when people are going to be looking at, I don't know, like IGN and seeing,
Yeah.
you know, that to me just seemed, and I'm not saying we'll never do it, but it seemed that it maybe wasn't the best place to start.
Mm.
I mean, like, guides writers they're on another level.
They are.
They're a different discipline. They are incredible. And the last thing I wanted to do was suddenly turn around to my news writers, my trending news writers, and say, "Oh, now you do guides," because it's not the same. It's a completely different discipline.
Mm.
And that's absolutely not something I wanted to do. Um, so yeah, it was interesting sort of working out Google Discover and sort of it's yeah, it's all sort of trying to divine the unknowable.
Mm.
And I do to this day believe that anyone who says that they are a complete and accurate expert in social media or search or wherever it may be, anything online, I think you have to take that with a pinch of salt because
Yeah.
everything changes so much. And so much of it I do think is based on trial and error. Um, you can be driven by the data, of course, but there is still such a huge degree of, well, let's try this and see what happens. You don't
Mm.
know until you try it. Um, but yeah, that's been really interesting. And in terms of traffic, we are bigger than we've ever been,
Great.
which is really exciting. Um, and even now we're making sort of plans for where we go next. It's not really anything I can like talk about, but it's all really exciting. Um, so yeah, I'm keen to see where I am with it all this time next year.
Great. And I feel like I do a bit of a disservice if I didn't mention like kind of the challenges that a lot of sites have been dealing with, like the past, 12, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. I mean, like just in the last few weeks, like time recording, I mean, like, Gfinity, a place I used to work at, they've had massive layoffs. Previously, it's like Lewis White, stuff optional. He was fantastic. He's been laid off. A lot of sites are bearing the brunt of like Google's ever-changing algorithms and the rise of AI, and it's such a shame. I mean, like, what's kind of your take on this, Ewan? Like, how have you been trying to kind of like deal with it in regards to like Gaming Bible and the rise of these two things?
I mean, the best you can kind of do, or the best I do, is just try and write it out. Stick to what we know is working, reassess if it becomes clear that it's really not working anymore. I think we've been in quite a fortunate position in that a lot of what has worked for us has not been the stuff that's been hit
Hmm.
by algorithm changes. A lot of sort of guides and how to's and that sort of traditional search stuff that you see, that's the stuff that I think has been really hit.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I think we've been lucky, really. We have kind of gotten by. Really, we certainly have not been hit anyway anything quite as hard as like some of the other websites have been. So yeah, I mean, but from what I've seen, there's another core update coming in a couple of weeks. So you're never on stable ground. You're always having to sort of reassess and look at what's working and what's not. And I look forward to doing that again in a couple of weeks. I'm sure it'll be a laugh riot.
Yes, definitely. And, even though I'm not on the gaming side of journalism, I mean, we've definitely, been trying to deal with that as well. And it's just, yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah, I just can't help but think that I feel like we're going to see some light at the end of a tunnel. I think people's needs to find certain content is, and I hate the word content, but I've just said it, of like searching for stuff, and I don't think it's going to be Google eventually. I do feel like it's changing because I think there are like people who like use the internet for certain things, and people think it's the norm, and people have always done it. But there was a time where people didn't use Google, they didn't use social media and stuff like that, and I just feel like there is something changing, but unfortunately, like our industry is like bearing the brunt of it, and it's a shame. But yeah, I think it's hopefully we'll see something change for the better soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've just got to. I mean, it's very easy to say stay positive because I know there are a lot of people that are really struggling with this a lot more than I am. As I said, I think a lot of it, and it's not even faux modesty. I think we've been very fortunate to be in the position that we're in. I don't quite know why we haven't been hit as hard as some other places. But I think a lot of people are sort of seeing that there's just real inconsistency with what Google is doing and who it's hitting, and it doesn't all make a lot of sense.
Mm,
But I do have to believe that eventually there's going to be some clearer communication and hopefully, a lot of people are able to make it out with their jobs. Yeah, so I'm just trying to stay positive.
yeah, no, that's great. And I don't want to kind of end on that note, really. I kind of like want to end the high
Yeah.
with this episode. So, obviously, I've been a big fan of like your work for so many years, you and I remember reading your Hogs of War feature a few years
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
That was great. And so I think just kind of like wrap up really properly is like, what is kind of like your highlights in your career so far? Like, if you like, maybe give me like three examples like that stick out to you straight away. Like, what would that be for you?
So off the top of my head, I would say being able to review Metroid Dread was a really big moment for me.
Mm,
Um, Not least because it was a game I never thought we'd see,
yeah,
you know, a sequel to Metroid Fusion just finally releasing, just absolutely incredible. And then that I got to be the one to review it. At this point, I'd written tons of reviews
yeah,
for Gaming Bible and Unilad Gaming. So it wasn't so much, but I do feel like every now and again a review lands in your lap and you remember all over again that just how incredibly lucky you're doing this.
yeah.
Um, and Metroid Fusion, Metroid Dread was one of those for me. It was a real man. If I could go back in time and tell younger me who just finished Metroid Fusion and was wondering if a sequel was ever going to come out, like that was huge. A real pinch me moment. Another piece I did one of the earliest features I did at Unilad Gaming was I decided to rank all 151 Gen 1 Pokemon from worst to best.
Wow.
And yeah, it was madness. But that was a lot of fun to do. It's a really big, long piece. And it's the kind of stuff I could really dive into when I wasn't also managing a team of people and sort of looking at spreadsheets and sorting out holidays and stuff. But that was a lot of fun. It really leaned into the sort of the nonsense kind of tone that I like to write in and the kind of stuff that got my foot in the door at Kotaku UK.
Mm,
Just that really just silly. Like I love just writing just really silly stuff. I think there's a time and a place for real deep reporting and criticism, and that's great, and I love all of that. But I also just embracing the fact that at the end of the day, video games are just ridiculous.
yeah.
They're so ridiculous, and it's mad that they exist, but they're brilliant, wonderful things, and I think it's great to just embrace the fun that comes with video games. Um, and the third highlight, I think, would probably be a couple years back. I interviewed one of the lead developers on Spider-Man PS1.
Oh wow.
So just loop it back to the beginning of this podcast. And that was really cool getting to sort of go back and do a big sort of deep, long look at one of these really formative video games for me. And I do always love doing that, sort of going back and diving into these retro games, like with the Hogs of War piece, because I do find a lot of the people who worked on those games back in the day, who might not necessarily be working in the industry anymore, they're always so happy to talk to you and just share these stories.
Yeah.
And I just think that's, it's wonderful to sort of to chat to those people and see them light up when you talk about how something they made had such an impact on you. I think that's a really great part of the job.
Yeah, that's really great, man. No, I really appreciate that. And yeah, so I think we're going to wrap it there, really, you. And then thank you so much for this. I've been waiting to talk to you on Palkeys for years, so and I think the wait's been worth it.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, not a problem, man, at all. No, not a problem. So, where can people find you and your work?
So you can find most of my work these days on Gaming Bible. I also have a muck rack profile because apparently everyone does. It's just something that happens. Um, a lot of my older stuff will be on there, but obviously I am kind of exclusively writing for Gaming Bible these days, so all the reviews and features will be there. And if you do want to brave the cesspit, that is Twitter. I'm on there. It's at @emore_.
Fantastic. And I'm sure people will be able to catch up with your Steam Deck updates and what you'll be playing on there as well.
Absolutely.
No, that's great, man. So yeah, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for listening. Again, you can catch Palkeys on Palkeys Podcast on X. Also, catch up on details at Springboard at my site. And yeah, until next time, thank you so much.